The rain fell softly that night, turning the city streets into mirrors of glistening gold under the streetlights. In the midst of that shimmering chaos, a girl stood outside a luxury jewelry store, her clothes worn, her shoes barely holding together. Her eyes, however, carried something no wealth could buy: quiet dignity. Inside the store, a tall man in a charcoal suit was signing a document. His presence commanded the room, the kind of man whose silence was more powerful than most people's words. Alexander Moretti, the billionaire heir to one of Africa's most influential business empires, was known for his ruthless precision. But tonight, his gaze was restless, almost distracted, as though something invisible pulled at him. He stepped out of the store just as a girl moved closer, her eyes fixed on the necklace displayed in the window, a delicate piece of gold shaped like a crescent moon, adorned with single emerald drop. It was the exact same design Alexander had custom-made years ago for his late mother. The original had gone missing after her death, and though he had searched for years, it had vanished without a trace. "Excuse me," he called softly, his voice low but commanding. The girl froze, startled, turned to face him. Her name was Amina. Raindrops clung to her lashes like crystals. She looked too young to carry such sadness in her eyes. "Where did you get that necklace?" Alexander asked, nodding toward her neck. Amina's hand instinctively reached up to touch it. A faint tremor ran through her fingers. The same crescent moon, slightly dulled by time, but unmistakably the one he'd lost, hung around her throat. "This?" she whispered, her voice trembling. "It was my mother's. She said it was the only thing she ever owned that reminded her of kindness." For a moment, Alexander forgot how to breathe. His chest tightened. "Your mother?" "Yes," Amina said, her gaze lowering. She worked for a wealthy family many years ago. She said they were kind to her until one day something happened. She lost her job and everything else. She died last year." The world around him seemed to vanish. His heartbeat echoed like thunder in his ears. Could it be? His late mother's most trusted housemaid had disappeared suddenly after the necklace went missing. His father had accused her of theft. He remembered the humiliation, the police, the silence. And now, standing before him was her daughter. "Your mother's name," he said, his voice tight. "Evelyn." Amina whispered. "Evelyn Wangi." The name struck him like a blade. Evelyn. The woman who had practically raised him when his mother was ill. The woman who used to hum lullabies in the language of the plains. Who smiled even when the house was filled with grief. Alexander's voice cracked. Evelyn never stole that necklace. Amina's eyes widened. Then why did they say she did? "Because my father needed someone to blame," he said bitterly. "And I believed him." For the first time in years, the billionaire's carefully built walls began to crumble. He looked at the necklace again, the very proof that Evelyn had kept it, not for greed, but for remembrance. "Where do you live?" he asked quietly. "In Kibra," Amina said. "I work at the market sometimes, sewing clothes. It's enough for rent and a little food." Alexander nodded, his eyes clouded with emotion. "Come with me. There's something I need to show you." She hesitated, but followed as he led her into his car, a black Maybach that moved like a whisper through the rain. The city lights faded behind them as they drove toward the Moretti estate, a sprawling mansion that seemed to float in the darkness like a ghost from another world. When they entered the grand hall, Amina's breath caught. Portraits of powerful men and women lined the marble walls. But her eyes stopped at one, a smiling woman with soft brown eyes, wearing the very same necklace. Alexander stood beside her, his expression unreadable. "That was my mother," he said quietly. "She loved Evelyn. She never believed she stole anything. My father, he lied to protect his pride." Tears welled in Amina's eyes. "So all those years, my mother suffered for something she didn't do." He nodded, guilt weighing heavy on his face. "And I was too blind to see it." The silence between them was heavy. Yet something gentle began to bloom within it, the fragile beginning of understanding. Then Amina said softly, "She told me that one day the truth would find its way back, even if it had to walk through storms." Alexander's eyes glistened. "It did," he murmured. and it came wearing her necklace. He turned to her then, the air shifting. Amina, I can't undo what happened to your mother, but I can make sure her name is cleared, and your life changes from this day forward. She looked at him, uncertain. Why would you do that? Because I owe her, he said, his voice breaking. And because I owe you. But before Amina could respond, a sharp voice echoed from the staircase above them. Alexander, a woman called Coley. Who is she? Amina looked up to see a tall woman descending the stairs, elegant, poised, and clearly furious. It was Clara, Alexander's fiancée. Her eyes darted to Amina's necklace, then Alexander's expression, and something dark flashed across her face. The billionaire's jaw tightened. Clara, not now. But Clara's lips curved into a thin smile. Oh, I think now is the perfect time. I've heard enough whispers about you chasing ghosts of the past, but this? She turned to Amina. Who exactly are you? Amina stepped back slightly, her hands trembling, but before she could speak, Alexander moved closer to Amina, his body instinctively shifting in front of her as if to shield her from Clara's venom. The tension in the room was so thick it could be cut with a knife. Clara, he said firmly, this has nothing to do with you. Clara gave a cold laugh, her heels clicking sharply against the marble as she descended the last few steps. Nothing to do with me? You bring some girl from the streets into our home, looking like that, and tell me it has nothing to do with me? I think it has everything to do with me. Amina's eyes lowered, embarrassment flooding her face. She could feel every ounce of Clara's scrutiny, the disdain dripping from her words like poison. Her fingers curled tightly around the pendant on her chest, the small crescent moon that had somehow dragged her into this world of power and secrets. Alexander's tone turned to steel. Clara, this is not a discussion. Leave her out of whatever you're imagining. But Clara wasn't the kind to back down. She crossed her arms, her diamond bracelet catching the chandelier light. Then tell me, Alexander, why does she have your mother's necklace? The one that was stolen. That's exactly why she's here. He snapped, his patience thinning. Because it wasn't stolen. It was taken from Evelyn, the woman your father-in-law accused years ago. This girl is her daughter. For a moment, even Clara faltered. The arrogance in her eyes flickered with uncertainty, then hardened again. You mean that servant woman? The one who disappeared after the theft. Not theft, Alexander said coldly. Injustice. A long silence followed, filled only by the soft hum of the rain outside. Clara's lips curved slightly. You've always had a weakness for lost causes, haven't you? The boy with a guilty conscience, trying to save the world one peasant at a time. Amina flinched. The words hit harder than she expected. She wanted to leave, to vanish before she became the reason for yet another wound in someone else's life. But Alexander turned, his eyes locking with hers, silently urging her to stay. Enough, Clara, he said, his voice low and dangerous. You're crossing a line. Clara smiled thinly, her gaze darting between them. You think I don't see it? That look in your eyes? Don't tell me this poor little orphan has already managed to make you feel something. Her laughter was sharp, echoing off the marble walls. How poetic. The billionaire and the beggar girl. Get out, Alexander said quietly. Clara blinked. Excuse me? I said get out, he repeated, louder this time. Leave the house. Tonight. Her expression twisted, disbelief flashing across her face. You're throwing me out for her? No, he said, stepping closer. I'm asking you to leave because you've forgotten what respect means. For a moment, Clara stood frozen, lips trembling with rage. Then she turned sharply, her heels cracking against the floor like gunshots as she stormed out, her words slicing the air behind her. You will regret this, Alexander. You always regret kindness. The echo of the front door slamming lingered in the silence that followed. Amina stood still, unsure whether to speak or disappear into the shadows. I shouldn't have come, she whispered finally. I caused trouble for you. Alexander exhaled, shaking his head. No, Amina, you didn't cause trouble. You brought truth. She looked up at him then, her eyes shimmering with confusion and something deeper, something neither of them could yet name. He walked to a cabinet in the corner and opened it slowly. Inside was a collection of old photo albums, their leather covers worn and fading. He pulled one out and handed it to her. "Look," he said softly. Amina opened the album with trembling hands. The first photograph was of a young boy, Alexander, no older than 7, sitting on a garden bench beside a smiling woman in a maid's uniform, Evelyn. Her smile was as warm as sunlight. "She used to bring me mangoes from the kitchen garden," Alexander said, his voice distant with memory. "When my mother was sick, Evelyn was the one who sang to me at night. She called me Mwana Watamani, the child of hope." Amina's breath hitched. "She called me that, too," she said quietly, tears slipping down her cheeks. "Every night." He smiled faintly, his eyes softening. "Then I know it's true. You really are her daughter." The realization hung between them, heavy, bittersweet, yet strangely comforting. "She would have wanted you to know," Amina murmured. "Before she died," she said, "that one day, the man who lost everything would find the truth again through something precious he thought was gone." Alexander looked at her, stunned. "She said that?" Amina nodded. "She said he would understand only when his heart was ready." He sank onto the edge of the sofa, his head in his hands. "God, Evelyn, you were still trying to forgive us even after all that pain." Amina sat beside him quietly. The crackling of the fireplace filled the silence as the storm outside began to fade. After a long pause, Alexander lifted his gaze to her. "Amina, how have you lived all these years?" "Alone." She hesitated, then nodded. "After Mama died, I had no one. I worked at the market, sewing dresses. Some nights I slept there too. It wasn't easy, but it was life." Something in his chest tightened. "You shouldn't have had to live like that." Her smile was soft, almost sad. "I survived. That's enough." He stared at her for a moment, studying the quiet resilience in her face, the same strength Evelyn once carried. It wasn't just survival. It was grace in its purest form. Then his phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen, frowning. It was his father's lawyer. He ignored it. "You're not going back to the market," he said suddenly. "Not anymore." Amina blinked. "What do you mean?" "I'll make sure you have everything you need. A place to live, education, work if you want it. You deserve that chance." Her eyes widened. "Mr. Moretti, I can't accept that." "It's not charity," he said, his tone firm but kind. "It's justice." She shook her head slowly. "You don't owe me anything. You didn't do what your father did." He looked away. But I didn't stop him either. For a long time, neither spoke. The firelight danced between them, shadows flickering across their faces. Then, quietly, Amina said, "Maybe forgiveness is also a kind of justice." He looked at her again, this time not as a daughter of a wronged woman, but as someone who carried a strength he didn't know he needed. Outside, the rain had stopped completely. The world was still wrapped in silence. Alexander stood and walked toward the window, gazing at the dark horizon. "There's something you don't know, Amina," he said quietly. "My father is still alive, and he doesn't believe in forgiveness." Amina's expression changed. "He's alive?" "Yes," Alexander replied. "He lives in the countryside now, away from the city. But if I tell him what I've discovered tonight, he'll fight it. He'll deny it all. To him, admitting he was wrong would mean destroying his own legacy." Amina stepped closer. "Then what will you do?" He turned, his eyes clouded with conflict. "I don't know yet, but I can't let Evelyn's name remain tainted, even if it means standing against him." She hesitated, searching his face. "Then I'll stand with you." For a moment, he said nothing. Then a small, almost disbelieving smile curved his lips. "You do that?" "Yes," she said softly. "Because my mother believed truth doesn't belong to the rich or the powerful. It belongs to those who aren't afraid to speak it." Her words struck him like light through fog, sharp, clear, undeniable. He nodded slowly, determination settling into his voice. "Then we'll find proof. Records, witnesses, anything that clears her name." Amina looked at him, her heart pounding. For the first time in years, she felt something she hadn't dared to. Hope. But just as she opened her mouth to reply, a faint noise echoed from the hallway. The creak of a door. Footsteps. Alexander frowned and turned. "Did you hear that?" Amina nodded, her pulse quickening. From the shadows beyond the archway, a tall figure stepped into view, older, silver-haired, but unmistakably commanding. It was his father. Alexander froze where he stood, every muscle in his body tightening as the man stepped forward. The air in the grand hall turned heavy, a silence so complete it seemed even the flames in the fireplace stilled out of respect. The years had carved deep lines into the old man's face, but his eyes still held the same glacial authority that had once ruled empires and shattered hearts. "Father," Alexander whispered, his voice barely audible. "Son," replied Richard Moretti, his tone cold and deliberate. "I see you finally decided to dig up ghosts." Amina took a step back, instinctively clutching the pendant at her throat. Her pulse quickened. This was the man, the one whose decision had destroyed her mother's life, whose word had turned truth into betrayal. Richard's eyes flicked toward her. "And who is this?" Alexander moved slightly, standing between them. "Her name is Amina. She's Evelyn Mwangi's daughter." The old man's jaw tightened for the briefest moment, though his expression remained eerily composed. "I see. She has my mother's necklace," Alexander continued. "The one you said Evelyn stole." Richard's gaze sharpened. "And you believe that changes anything?" "It changes everything," Alexander said firmly, "because it proves she didn't steal it. You lied to protect your reputation, and an innocent woman paid the price." The elder Moretti's expression flickered, not with guilt, but with the faintest smirk. "My reputation built this family." "Built you? Built me?" Alexander's voice rose, raw with emotion. "No, father. You built an empire on silence and shame. You destroyed lives, protect a name carved in gold." Richard's tone stayed eerily calm. "And what would you have done, boy? Let scandal tear us apart? Let the media chew our family to pieces over servant? That necklace was missing. Someone had to take the blame." Amina's voice, small but trembling with quiet power, broke through the room. "Someone innocent." Richard turned toward her, his icy stare landing like a blow. "You think the world cares about innocence, girl? The world cares about power. Who has it? Who doesn't? That's the truth your mother never understood." Amina's eyes glistened with tears, but she didn't look away. She understood more than you ever did. She understood kindness. She understood dignity. She never spoke ill of you, even after what you did. She said one day, the truth would find its voice, even if you tried to bury it beneath your riches. Her words hit like thunder. The old man stiffened, his composure cracking just slightly, just enough for Alexander to see the faintest tremor in his father's hands. "Evelyn was loyal," Alexander said softly. "You broke her spirit, and you made me believe she was a thief. I lived with that guilt all my life." Richard's voice hardened. "You're emotional, like your mother." "Maybe," Alexander said, "but she had something you never will, a conscience." The firelight flickered across his face, revealing the raw fury and heartbreak that had been buried for years. "I won't let you silence this truth again, father. Not this time." Richard took a slow, deliberate step forward. "And what do you plan to do, Alexander? Destroy your family's legacy over a maid who's been dead for decades." "Legacy?" Alexander echoed, his voice shaking. "What good is legacy if it's built on lies?" The silence that followed was deafening. Amina watched the two men, father and son, pride and pain colliding in the same room. And then, with a courage that surprised even her, she reached into her pocket and pulled out a small, folded letter, yellow with age, edges frayed. "My mother left this for me," she said softly. "She told me to give it to the man with her necklace when the time was right." She handed it to Alexander, who opened it with trembling hands. The handwriting was elegant, familiar, Evelyn's. He began to read aloud, his voice faltering at first, then growing steadier. "If you are reading this, it means the truth has finally found its way home. I never took what wasn't mine. I kept the necklace because it was a memory of love, not for its value, but for what it meant. The woman who wore it showed me kindness when the world showed me none. If her son ever finds this, tell him that forgiveness is not weakness. It is freedom. Let him free himself." The words seemed to echo through the hall, wrapping themselves around the three of them like an invisible wind. Alexander's eyes burned with unshed tears. "She forgave you," he whispered, looking at his father. "Even after everything." Richard said nothing. His gaze dropped for the first time in years. He looked old, truly old. The weight of decades of arrogance seemed to collapse upon him in a single breath. The silence stretched until he finally spoke, his voice quieter than it had ever been. "You think forgiveness changes the past?" "No," Alexander said gently, "but it changes what we become after it." For a long time, Richard didn't move. The fire crackled softly, and the sound of distant thunder rolled across the night. Then, without a word, he turned toward the door. His cane echoed against the marble floor as he walked away. Slow, deliberate, heavy with the sound of regret. Just before he disappeared into the shadows, his voice floated back, rough and fragile. "Tell her daughter that I'm sorry." And then he was gone. The hall felt lighter somehow, as if the mansion itself had exhaled a breath it had been holding for decades. Alexander stood still, the letter trembling in his hands. Amina wiped her tears quietly. "You did it," she whispered. "The truth is out." He turned to her, his expression soft but haunted. "We did it." Outside, the rain began again, but this time was gentle, almost cleansing. The storm had passed, and the earth was breathing anew. In the days that followed, the Moretti estate became a place of transformation. Alexander personally reached out to the press, releasing a statement that cleared Evelyn Wangi's name. Her story spread across newspapers, online headline, and television screens. The billionaire who exposed his own family's secret to restore a maid's honor. The world called it noble. Alexander didn't see it as noble. He saw it as overdue. He visited Evelyn's grave soon after, with Amina beside him. They stood under a vast acacia tree, the wind whispering through its leaves. The headstone was simple, unmarked for years, but now it bore her name in gold. Evelyn Wangi, a woman of grace and truth. Alexander knelt down, laying a white lily against the stone. "I'm sorry," he murmured, "for believing a lie, for not finding you sooner." Beside him, Amina placed crescent moon necklace atop the grave. "She doesn't need it anymore," she said softly. "It's where it belongs now." They stood in silence for a long time, letting the wind carry the weight of unspoken words. Then, as the sun broke through the clouds, Amina turned to him. "What will you do now?" He smiled faintly. "Start again, but this time differently." She tilted her head. "Differently how?" "By building something that lasts, not in marble or gold, but in kindness. Maybe a foundation. For single mothers, orphaned children, people like your mother once was." Amina looked at him, warmth rising in her chest. "She like that?" He nodded. "So would my mother." Their eyes met. Two souls bound by pain, forgiveness, and something unspoken that hovered softly between them. The kind of connection that didn't need words. As months passed, the Evelyn Foundation was born. It began quietly, but soon grew into one of the most respected humanitarian organizations across Africa. Schools were built, homes restored, lives changed. Amina became its heart, leading, organizing, speaking for those who couldn't. And Alexander, once the distant billionaire haunted by guilt, became the man who found purpose in compassion. Sometimes, when the city lights glittered beyond the hills, they would stand together on the balcony of the foundation's main building. He'd look at her, the night wind playing in her hair, and think of the strange, miraculous way fate had written their story, a tale that began with a missing necklace and ended with two hearts learning how to heal. Yet it wasn't really an ending. One evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the sky in gold and crimson, Alexander turned to her. "Amina," he said softly, "I've learned something through all of this. Money can build walls, but truth builds bridges." She smiled. "And forgiveness built homes." He looked at her for a long moment, then said quietly, "Maybe one day you'll let me build one with you." Amina laughed, a sound like dawn breaking. "Maybe one day," she said. The wind carried her laughter through the air, over the city, over the places where pain once lived, and toward the world they were now trying to mend together. And as the stars began to emerge above them, the crescent moon rose once more, the same shape as a necklace that had changed everything, glowed like a promise that the past could be healed, and that even the deepest wounds could give birth to light.